Welcome, deep divers. Today, we're plunging into Reconstruction. That really pivotal, super complex time right after the Civil War, roughly 1865 to 1877.
Yeah, when America was basically trying to put itself back together.
Exactly. And based on the research we've looked at, our mission today is to, well, unpack the huge impact of government policy back then. We're asking, who really benefited?
And who lost out? Crucially, why did this whole massive experiment, this attempt to remake the nation, run into so many roadblocks?
Right. How do you mend a country that's been torn apart? And maybe even more fundamentally, how do you define citizenship when millions of people are suddenly free? Big questions.
Huge questions. And it's such a critical era for us to grasp because those debates, those policies during Reconstruction, they fundamentally changed the whole relationship between the states and the federal government. And maybe even more profoundly, it forced these new, often really contentious definitions of what it meant to be a citizen, not just for African Americans, but, for women, other minorities too.
The ripples are still felt, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. The echoes of these debates, as we'll get into, they really resonate throughout American history.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Let's unpack that foundational conflict, the one that kind of shaped everything that followed.
Right.
At the very start of Reconstruction, the basic question was pretty stark, wasn't it? Should the defeated Confederacy be treated, gently with forgiveness?
Or like a conquered enemy that needed, well, punishment and a complete overhaul.
Yeah, and this wasn't just theoretical stuff. It massively influenced every single policy that came next.
Absolutely. And initially, you had President Abraham Lincoln pushing for a vision of rapid forgiving reintegration.
This 10% plan. Yeah.
Exactly. Pretty straightforward, really.
Oh.
Only 10% of the voters from 1860 in a former Confederate state had to swear loyalty to the Union.
And ratify the 13th Amendment,
Yeah.
the one abolishing slavery.
Correct. Lincoln genuinely believed that being too harsh would just, deepen the wounds and risk more fighting down the line.
A pragmatic approach, maybe? But sadly, his vision it didn't get a chance to play out, did it?
No. April 14th, 1865. Lincoln's assassinated. A massive shock, obviously.
And what's really interesting, I think, is how his successor, Andrew Johnson, then tried to carry on a similar lenient plan. But his reasons were totally different.
Completely different. Johnson, he was a Southerner himself. And, well, let's just say he had zero sympathy for emancipation or racial equality. Not his priority at all.
So under his watch.
He pretty much allowed the old slave-owning class, the elites, to just slide back into power in the South with hardly any federal oversight.
And the result was immediate, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. You immediately saw the passage of the infamous Black Codes.
These laws were just unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Incredibly restrictive laws designed specifically to limit the freedom of Black Americans, force them into low-wage jobs, essentially trying to recreate the conditions of slavery in all but name.
Circumventing the whole point of emancipation.
Exactly. It showed just how quickly that leniency Johnson offered was, well, exploited.
It's kind of breathtaking, really. You fight this devastating war to end slavery, and then almost immediately, these laws spring up trying to push free people right back down.
It is.
And this is where the radical Republicans in Congress really dug their heels in, right? They saw what was happening.
They certainly did. Their vision was the complete opposite of Johnson's approach.
So what was their take? How did they want Reconstruction to happen?
Well, the radicals looked at the sheer cost of the war, the death, the destruction, and they believed the South needed a much more punitive restructuring. They had to pay a price.
But Congress takes the lead.
That was their goal. Lead Reconstruction from Capitol Hill, make sure any kind of Southern resurgence was stamped out, and, crucially, commit federal power to uphold and actually extend rights for Black people in the South.
A moral dimension too, then.
For many of them, yes, a moral imperative, but also a practical safeguard against the South, just going back to its old ways. A major clash was brewing.
Okay, so Lincoln's leniency is gone. Johnson's version is failing spectacularly with the Black Codes, and you've got the radical Republicans pushing for real fundamental change. How did the federal government actually try to redefine citizenship in this moment?
This is where things get really interesting, constitutionally speaking.
The big amendments.
Exactly. This era brings us three absolutely crucial constitutional amendments. They reshape the entire legal landscape. First, the 13th Amendment. Monumental. It formally abolished slavery across the entire nation, the direct outcome of the war.
Done. Finished.
Legally, yes. Then came the 14th Amendment, which was really complex, multi-layered. It granted citizenship to everyone born or naturalized in the U.S. that explicitly included formerly enslaved people.
A huge step.
Massive. And it guaranteed equal protection of the laws. Importantly, it applied this to the states, not just the federal government.
So states couldn't just ignore it.
That was the intent. And there was a clever bit in there, too. It aimed to reduce congressional representation for states that denied black men the right to vote, a political incentive.
And the third one?
The 15th Amendment. This one specifically addressed voting. It prohibited denying the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude.
So explicitly giving black men the vote.
Explicitly. Now, these three amendments together, they form the bedrock of civil rights law in America, even though, as we know, actually realizing those rights took, well, a very long time.
Decades. Generations even. So beyond these huge constitutional shifts, what other tools did Congress use? Especially since President Johnson was actively fighting them, right? Vetoing things.
Oh, he was fighting them tooth and nail.
Yeah.
But Congress was incredibly active. They established the Freedmen's Bureau.
Right, I've read about that. An agency to help the newly freed population.
Exactly. Set up specifically to help them transition. Provided food, housing, medical care, set up schools, which was huge, and even offered legal help. Extending the life of the Bureau was a major goal for the Republicans.
And they passed laws, too, didn't they, over Johnson's objections?
They did. The crucial one was the Civil Rights Act of 1866. This law directly protected the citizenship of black people and guaranteed them equal protection under the law.
And Johnson vetoed it.
He did. But Congress had the numbers, a two-thirds majority, and they overrode his veto. A landmark moment.
Wow. That really shows Congress flexing its muscles.
Absolutely. It showed they were determined to push their Reconstruction agenda forward, even directly against the president.
And that determination, that led to what we often call radical Reconstruction, didn't it, with the Reconstruction Act?
Yes, the acts of 1867 and 68. This was Congress really taking control.
What did they actually do? How much federal power were they willing to use?
They used a lot of federal power, unprecedented, really. They divided the former Confederacy minus Tennessee, which had already ratified the 14th Amendment, into 5 military districts.
Military districts, so federal troops on the ground.
Yes, federal troops enforcing the law. And they ramped up the requirements for those states to rejoin the Union. They now had to ratify the 14th Amendment, and crucially, they had to grant voting rights to all men, black and white.
Universal male suffrage, essentially, imposed by the federal government.
Imposed. It really forces you to ask that question. How much federal power is justified when trying to enforce such massive social change on unwilling states? It was an extraordinary intervention.
Aimed at making sure those new constitutional rights actually meant something on the ground.
Precisely.
But, I mean, this wasn't just policy debates in Congress. This was a real raw power struggle playing out, wasn't it? President Johnson versus the radical Republicans. Must have been intense.
So incredibly intense, a constitutional showdown, really. Johnson's opposition wasn't subtle. It felt almost like a personal crusade against what Congress was trying to do.
Vetoing everything he could.
Routinely. We mentioned the Freedmen's Bureau extension and the Civil Rights Act, both vetoed, but Congress, showing its strength, just overrode him. They had the votes, that two-thirds majority.
A clear message about who was driving Reconstruction.
Absolutely. It was a very public demonstration of legislative power overcoming executive opposition.
And this constant fighting, this antagonism, it eventually boiled over into something truly dramatic, didn't it?
It did. One of the most dramatic moments in presidential history, the impeachment of Andrew Johnson.
Congress actually tried to remove him from office.
They did. The radical Republicans and even some moderates were just completely fed up. They felt Johnson was actively sabotaging Reconstruction.
So how did they make their move?
They passed a law called the Tenure of Office Act in 1867. Basically, it said the president couldn't fire a cabinet member without Senate approval. They were trying to protect allies in Johnson's own cabinet, like Secretary of War Edwin Stanton.
And Johnson challenged it.
He defied it directly, fired Stanton anyway, and that was the trigger. Congress immediately initiated impeachment proceedings in the House.
A full-blown trial in the Senate. High drama.
Absolutely, and what's truly amazing is the outcome. He was acquitted, saved from removal by just one single vote in the Senate.
One vote? What?
One vote. But even though he stayed in office, the whole process basically broke his power. He was effectively rendered powerless to block or really direct Reconstruction policy after that.
A huge moment for the balance of power between the president and Congress.
Definitely. It set precedents and raised questions about presidential power and congressional oversight that, well, still come up today.
Okay, so while all this political drama is unfolding and black men are gaining these critical new rights citizenship, voting what's happening with the women's rights movement? Because these same amendments had a big impact there too, but maybe not in the way people expected.
That's a really important and often overlooked part of the story. It created a really profound division within the movement.
How so?
Well, both the 14th and 15th Amendments, while they were obviously monumental for black men, explicitly did not grant women the right to vote.
Right. The 15th Amendment mentions race, color, previous condition of servitude, but not sex.
Exactly. And even worse, for many suffragists, the 14th Amendment actually introduced the word male into the Constitution for the first time when discussing voting rights.
Ouch. So that felt like a step backward for them.
For many, yes, a huge step backward. And this distinction, this specific exclusion of women while black men were being included, it caused this significant, almost heartbreaking split in the women's suffrage movement. It forced activists to choose sides.
So this split, how did it actually look? What were the different factions or strategies that came out of it?
You basically saw two main organizations emerge with different approaches. On one side, you had the National Women's Suffrage Association, the NWSA, led by giants like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony.
Okay, what was their stance?
They continued to fight for a federal amendment granting universal women's suffrage, and they fiercely opposed the 15th Amendment precisely because it excluded women. They felt betrayed, arguing that it was the Negro's hour, but not the woman's.
A tough position.
And the
other side?
That was the American Women's Suffrage Association, the AWSA, led by figures like Lucy Stone and Henry Blackwell. They took a different tack.
They supported the 15th Amendment.
Yes, they supported the 15th Amendment. They saw it as a vital, necessary step forward for racial equality, even though it left women out for the moment. Their strategy was more focused on achieving women's suffrage state by state, while still backing the federal Reconstruction efforts for black rights.
Two very different strategies born from the same disappointment.
Exactly. And alongside them, you had important figures like Frances E.W. Harper and Mary Ann Shadd Curry, black women who were advocating for both racial and gender equality, highlighting that crucial intersection.
But the legal system wasn't exactly helpful for women either, was it?
Not at all. You see cases like Bradwell v. Illinois in 1873. The Supreme Court actually upheld a state's decision to deny Myra Bradwell the right to practice law simply because she was a woman.
Wow. So much for equal protection.
It starkly showed the profound limits of equal protection when it came to gender discrimination back then. Professional fields, voting major barriers remained firmly in place for women.
So let's step back and look at the big picture. All this energy, these new laws, amendments, the struggles. What was the ultimate result of Reconstruction? Did it actually achieve those ambitious goals, or did it, in the end, fall short?
It's a mixed bag, but the ending isn't happy. It's really vital, though, to acknowledge that there were significant short-term successes, especially driven by those radical and moderate Republican efforts.
Like what? What were the bright spots?
Well, first and foremost, the political participation of African Americans. It was unprecedented. Many freedmen were elected to local offices, state legislatures, even the U.S. Congress. Hiram Revels serving in the Senate, that was truly remarkable.
A former slave state sending a black man to the Senate. Incredible.
Absolutely. We also saw a significant expansion of public education systems across the South. Creating schools for black children, and often poor white children too, was a major focus of Republican state governments.
Building foundations for the future.
Trying to. And there were some economic initiatives aimed at helping freed people, like the Freedmen's Bureau efforts, though the big dream of widespread land redistribution, 40 acres and a mule, that largely failed to happen.
So some real tangible gains. Foundational changes, almost. But we know the story doesn't end there. Reconstruction ultimately failed, didn't it? It didn't last.
No, it didn't. Despite those initial positive steps, it was ultimately undone.
What were the key factors? Why did it unravel?
You can really boil it down to two main interconnected reasons. First, relentless and often violent Southern resistance.
White resistance.
Yes. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan used terrorism, violence, and intimidation tactics on a massive scale. They targeted black voters, politicians, communities, and any white allies supporting Reconstruction.
Making it dangerous just to participate.
Exactly. And politically, Southern Democrats worked constantly to regain control, often using fraud and voter suppression. Plus, the reemergence of laws like the Black Codes, Jim Crow laws starting to appear, further restricted freedom and locked black people into a cycle of poverty and near powerlessness, essentially reestablishing white supremacy.
So intense pushback from the South. What was the second factor?
The North. just lost interest. The political will, the commitment in the North, it faded over time. People grew tired of the constant conflict, the expense of military occupation. Economic problems in the 1870s shifted focus. Racism certainly played a role, too.
The resolve just wasn't there anymore.
It evaporated, and this culminated in the infamous Compromise of 1877.
Ah, the deal that settled the disputed 1876 presidential election.
Precisely. Rutherford B. Hayes got the presidency, and in return, the Republicans agreed to pull the last federal troops out of the South. That effectively ended federal enforcement of Reconstruction policies.
Abandoning the project.
Pretty much abandoning the South, and particularly black Southerners, to their fate. It signaled the definitive end, the failure of the Reconstruction era. And if you look at the big picture, it's a harsh lesson in how incredibly hard it is to sustain major social and political change without consistent unified political will over the long haul.
Wow. Okay, so we've journeyed through this incredibly turbulent, really transformative period, a deep dive into an era that saw huge constitutional shifts, bitter power struggles, between Congress and the president, and this deeply divided chase for equality.
Yeah.
And the challenges they faced back then, trying to reconcile a nation ripped apart, figuring out who belongs, who's a citizen, ensuring justice. I mean, these themes, they still feel incredibly relevant today, don't they?
They really do. This era is just such a stark reminder of how incredibly difficult it is, but also how profoundly important it is to try and rebuild a society and genuinely guarantee rights for everyone.
It shows that just writing laws, even constitutional amendments, isn't always enough.
Right? Exactly. Laws are crucial, absolutely. But they're only one piece of a much bigger, much more complicated puzzle. You also need shifts in culture, in attitudes, and that sustained political willpower we talked about.
So for you, listening and reflecting on this deep dive, here's something to chew on.
Yeah.
What does the ultimate failure of Reconstruction tell us about trying to legislate major social change? Can you really impose equality from the top down without a deeper, fundamental shift in cultural attitudes and political commitment?
And maybe what lessons could that hold for efforts today, right now, to tackle inequality and divisions in our own time?
A provocative thought to leave you with. Thanks for diving deep with us today.